So, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome. I'm Shikha Kaushik, a psychologist, author, and a mental health advocate, and a part of a therapist solution, where we work closely with the mental health professionals, support their growth, practice, and impact in a meaningful ways. At Therapist Solution, founded by Sajid Mola, our focus is in empowering professionals, helping them grow their practice. So, as a psychologist and trauma specialist myself, my work is deeply connected with understanding human behavior, perception, and emotional connection, which makes today's conversation especially more meaningful. I'm truly delighted to join by Jenny Henderson, an award-winning brand strategist and a designer, to help professionals shape their reputation as trusted service providers. Jenny, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Um, So let's just start with our journey. Introduce yourself, please, and how your journey started as a brand strategist and designer.
I live in Toronto in Canada. I actually have a background in fine arts. I was an artist. Now
Oh,
turned
wow.
my profession into a design field. So I started my career fresh out of design school. I got hired for a in-house design job for a boutique real estate brokerage. And this role taught me a lot about, how to run a small business and how to market a personal brand. And
Mm.
while I was running or had that job, I was also doing freelance design work on the side. And then eventually, quit my job to pursue my business full time. And so that's where I started my business, primarily focused on, brand identity design initially, helping small businesses, create identities to help them distinguish themselves. But then, the more I was honing my own skills and my process, I really started to understand how much it was really about asking the right questions and what those questions revealed and how that led to a stronger brand identity for the client. And so that's when I started to really learn and continue to learn a lot about brand strategy and just it's really an ongoing process because brand strategy is so much
Right.
about how you think about a problem. And so I love how that changes with every client.
Oh, that's amazing. So, you say your brand is basically your best sales tool, right? So, what does that mean in a practical term for professionals?
Yeah, so your brand is essentially the bridge between you and your next client. So when you think of it as a tool instead of just an aesthetic, we recognize that a tool serves a purpose. So your brand's purpose essentially is to reassure a potential client that you're the right person to hire. So when you think about their mindset, their problems, their current emotional state versus their desired emotional state, any hesitations they might have, all of these things, all of these insights really allow you to shape your brand in a way that's going to act as a functional tool for your business. So it leads to stronger messaging that validates their mindset and removes any uncertainty. It allows you to design an environment that gives them a dose of that feeling that they're chasing. And it instills confidence in you as a professional, but also in themselves in their decision to book that consultation with you or to send an inquiry. So when you approach your brand as a tool instead of just, a visual aesthetic, it can do so much more for your business and it can allow your brand to, attract a new client
Mm.
no matter where they encounter your business, online or in person.
That's definitely an important point. So, what point did you realize that branding is more important about the perception and psychology than just visuals?
Yeah, I think it's something I always understood, but not until I really started doing this job. And the first thing that came to mind is one of my first clients, actually. She came to me to rebrand her business, her coaching business years ago. And when she came to me, she didn't understand why she kept attracting male clients. She wanted to work mostly with women. And when I looked at her brand identity, her entire identity was gray, blue, yellow, and like really blocky typefaces. So much of how we perceive a brand or are drawn to a brand is based on these kind of subconscious things that our brain does for us. So another example would be like, I might buy a bottle of wine because it has a pretty label, but I'm not going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a service because a person has the prettiest brand. I'm looking for clues, within that brand that tell me that they're going to be a worthwhile investment. And part of that is, of course, strategic and thoughtful design choices, but the rest is so much more in the messaging and being clear and concise. Those are the things that really help shape our perception of who that person is and what they're capable of in helping me on my journey.
I'm actually stopping myself asking a question. I got too many questions, but that's okay. So, so the first question that is actually popping up, that how does the
Mhm.
emotional connection influence whether someone chooses to trust or ignore a brand?
You know what I mean? So much of our decision making is emotionally driven, right? So especially for personal brands like and one-on-one work like your audience would have, we're looking so much for that relatability piece in a service provider. Relatability is very much like a proxy for trust these days. And when we feel a connection to a service provider, and whether that's in, their values or their own personal experience or story, or even like their sense of humor, like those are the
Mhm.
things that make us feel more comfortable and more likely to trust that person because we feel a personal connection to them. And so when something feels more familiar, that familiarity really does breed that affection and that trust within that individual and the person that they're looking to hire.
Absolutely. So, what is the most professional misunderstood about the branding and when they are trying to grow their business, according to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always the same answer there is that a brand is only visual because it's one thing to be easily recognizable, that's one thing, but being recognized and remembered for what you do and the impact that your business has is another thing altogether. And I think where so many businesses struggle is, and I see it all the time still, is that
Mhm.
they can't commit to their brand identity or they can't commit to their messaging long enough for it to actually have an impact in their business and sales and acquiring new clients. They get bored, so they change their colors or their fonts, or they feel like they're not earning enough business, so they completely change their
Yeah.
messaging. But it's that commitment to consistency that really does compound over time. And you really need to give your audience that time to become familiar with you and your brand promise because the more you speak to it, and it might feel like you're being super repetitive, but the more you keep speaking to it, the more familiar it is to them, and the more likely they are to trust in that message and that promise.
Right, right. So, you work with the health and wellness coaching professionals, right? So, what makes branding
Mm-hmm.
in these fields unique in comparison to the other fields?
Yeah, I mean, I think for this particular bracket of this field is that it's so personal, right? It's very personal work, and so you really benefit from dedicating time in the beginning to understanding who your ideal clients are and what you bring to the table. And this isn't always easy, but it is very essential. So this is where, working with somebody outside of your business is really critical because so often when we're trying to brand ourselves, we're too close to our own business. We know so much. We want to say everything that we know because we think it'll help, attract a new client or,
Exactly.
grow your business.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really in simplifying things. And I think it's helpful to have somebody come in from outside your business that can bring that objective perspective so that they become that middle ground between you as the professional and your ideal client. And they know how to um, essentially kind of bridge that gap by keeping things simple, focusing on the language that is going to actually bridge that gap successfully. Um, because I think so much of the time we want to overcomplicate things because we want to tell them all the things we know, but really it's in simplifying and being really
Absolutely.
concise and specific that's really going to help bridge that gap. And especially when it's personal work like that, you really need to speak to those specific personal challenges that they have and how you can help them on their journey to resolve them.
I think so. Most of the time, we just show our achievements and our, degrees
Yes,
and all, and that didn't. So, you
it's
mentioned about the trust and credibility as well. So, when designing a brand for mental health professional or coaches, how important is that?
sorry.
That's okay.
My dogs were
That's
barking.
okay.
Um, sorry, can you repeat the question? I apologize. I got distracted by
No
my dogs.
problem. So, you mentioned about the trust and credibility when designing the brand about the mental health professional and coaches. How important do you think it would be for the
Oh, I mean,
mental health professionals? So, the trust and credibility, how important are they?
it's everything, right? Like I said, because it's such personal work, you really want to feel like as a client, you want to feel like you're in good hands when you hire somebody. And that's achieved so much in the language that you're using as a service professional, the specificity of that messaging, emphasizing with their problems and really painting a picture of what's possible through your service. Again, I think a good thing to keep in mind when you're focusing on your brand is always looking for opportunities to eliminate doubt in their mind, because that's such a big that's what holds people back, is if there's any uncertainty or doubt in their mind, that's what's going to stop them from pursuing you as a service provider. And it's important to remember that people are savvy today. Like, we can recognize when somebody has DIY'd their brand or when they've hired a
Hmm.
professional. And sometimes that DIY brand can send the wrong message. It can say, oh, maybe they're just starting out in their career. Like, maybe they're not as qualified to help me. But when you have somebody that has invested in themselves because they believe in their ability, then that says a lot about their expertise, their belief in themselves, and it gives you that confidence and that trust in that person to help you along your journey.
That's what aligns perfectly with what we do at Therapist Solution. Before growth comes trust, and branding plays a
Yes,
major role in establishing that, basically.
I love that.
So what role does consistency in branding? Because you mentioned, earlier that the consistency is very important. So how important is that in building a long-term client relationship?
Yeah, I think so much of the consistency piece plays a huge role in the marketing aspect, like building trust for new clients that come in. But when you're talking about the long-term relationships that you have with your clients, I think so much of that pertains to your purpose and your values and really being true to those parts of your brand that they've, come in the front door for. And once they're a client of yours, it's about the integrity of that relationship. Like, what are you doing to deliver on that brand promise that you spoke to? And how are you honoring your mission in the way that you show up in your relationship with them?
That's powerful insight. So many professionals have a strong skills but struggle with the visibility. Where do you think that gap lies?
I think it depends a lot on the individual and how they're approaching their marketing. And again, it's always going to go back to understanding your target audience. Where do they spend their time? Where are they looking for answers for their problems? Do they feel, especially with one-on-one work like this, I assume they want to feel a connection to that person. So maybe that video content piece is important for them to get to know you and feel like they have a connection with you through that visual dynamic. But it's also about understanding what you have a capacity for as a professional as well. So how can you stay top of mind that is going to meet them where they are, where they're looking for answers or looking for resources, but also in a way that you can sustain as a service provider. So there's lots of different avenues you can do this. And again, it's so depending. You really want to factor in how the behavior of your audience, and also what you can do. So whether it's like maybe a newsletter is better for you, that you can build your topical authority, you can give them direct information in their inbox, but also stay top of mind. You're always there to they can rely on you. Or maybe it's a weekly podcast like this, or like a vlog that they can again get to know you. The personal connection is so key, I think, in this capacity. But it's really just, yeah, figuring out what makes sense for you and also where they're actually spending their time and how they're looking for solutions to their problems.
Yeah, there was this one question that was popping up in my brain while you were answering it. So,
Please, yeah.
the important align branding, you said that digital presence is important, right? Digital presence, the content and the overall
Mhm.
positioning. But how overall it is important for a particular client, especially for the mental health wellness providers?
I mean, these are all extensions of your brand, right? So realistically, you want your brand to have parameters because it helps everything simplify for you as a service provider, but it helps you in building that topical authority and shaping your positioning and the specificity. And so when you again play that on repeat, when you speak to those same few topics that people come and become associated with you and your business, and they support your positioning, it reinforces that credibility in their mind. But if you're scattered and you're talking about this thing one day and that thing another day, and then you're all over the place, that again, it's creating doubt in their mind. It's confusing for them. So the more specific and simple you can build your brand or the foundation of your brand and just use that as your jumping off point, it makes your business so much easier, and it actually makes it more profitable, for instance, because you are topics of authority and expertise that you want to be known for. So think about how you want what you want your brand or your practice to be known for, and then speak to those things over and over again. And it does, again, I said this before, but it does feel kind of repetitive when you're the one speaking to it, but it doesn't feel like that for the audience. You need to give them that time to build that familiarity with your offers and with your area of expertise. That it takes time for people to kind of get familiar with that and to build that trust. So you want to really just be super, super consistent and focused on the reputation you're trying to shape for yourself.
So basically, what you are saying is that combining strategic branding with structured visibility is the effort that can significantly accelerate your growth, right?
100%. It's about finding that most sustainable path for you too. And again, thinking about it as like a long-term strategy. Like what can you commit to, whether it's your messaging or your visuals for 8 to 12 months, just to see how it impacts the bottom line in your business. Like commit to it because that's where you're actually going to start to see results.
Okay, so one final question. What advice would you
Sure.
give to professionals who feels unclear or stuck when it comes to the building their brand?
I think the best place to start is always focusing on your target audience. I think we often think about ourselves. We're trying to create a brand that represents us, but so much and basically everything you're doing about your brand should be catering to their needs. So much of the work that I do with clients is in deep diving on who those people are that they're trying to work with. What are those layers of their problem? Because sometimes it's more than just the functional problem that we think they have. It's how does that functional problem also make them feel, and what are the impacts of that on their identity. And there's so many layers that you can dig into that will shape how you speak to them on your website or in your marketing, that makes them feel like you truly understand who they are. And that is going to be such a golden nugget when it comes to getting those people to reach out to you. So I would say always when you're unclear, go back to what your audience needs and how you can help them in that process through your brand.
So what I understand is clarity is basically what you need. So clarity is a basic
Clarity.
point of every single thing that you are mentioning right now. So
Exactly. And it becomes so much easier to commit to your brand when you have that clarity. That piece becomes so much easier when you have that clarity to commit to.
well, thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing the
My
insights with
pleasure.
us today. This was not the information, it was deeply valuable. So, and to everyone watching, your brand is not just how you look, it's how you perceive, remember, and trust it. At Therapist Solution, we remain committed to empowering mental health professionals and life coaches to building the build strong, credible, and impactful private practices through the right blend of branding, visibility, and strategic growth. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.